Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Netcapital team. I see folks are trickling in. Let's allow one moment for everybody to get settled. Thanks so much for joining.
The other thing is, I'm not allowed to talk about future projections. I'm not allowed to talk about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we'll talk broadly about kind of what we hope for the future loosely, but we'll kind of give it a big caveat
Mhm.
and yeah, we won't dig into the specifics of pro forma or projected financial. Awesome. We still got a good chunk coming in. Welcome everybody. As I mentioned, I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Net Capital team. We can actually go ahead and start getting ready here. So I'll begin with a couple of quick housekeeping items. Thank you so much for everybody for joining. I'm so excited to be here with Kevin Wolf, co-founder, and CEO of Wind Harvest. As always, this company is actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform. I'm going to add a link directly to that into the chat now. You can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/windharvest or you can go to netcapital.com and search Wind Harvest, or you can also select this link that I'm adding into the chat right now. Alrighty, this here. Couple of quick housekeeping items. Please do use the Q&A feature built into Zoom. And please also know there's a chat feature. We want to keep it as interactive as possible, so feel free to engage with the chat. But any questions for Kevin, please do use the Q&A feature built into Zoom. That's the easiest way to track the questions. We want to make sure that we get to as many of them. So as I mentioned, we have the co-founder and CEO of Wind Harvest on the line here. I added a link to that into the chat feature. Please do get ready with your questions. We want to keep this interactive. But with all that being said, please join me in welcoming Kevin Wolf to the stage here. Kevin, why don't you come on in and tell us a little bit about what you're building with Wind Harvest?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate NetCapital's help with this whole effort. We are bringing a brand new turbine, long sought for, to the wind industry. This issue of turbulent wind near the ground that no one's been able to make a turbine for. Well, we've done it, and we are bringing this turbine through the final steps of commercialization, the certification process. And this raise on Net Capital is allowing us to do this, provides the capital to buy all the components and get the installation and get it through third-party testing and have it go to sales. So I'm very glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're at the helm here, but you have a great team around you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the rest of the folks on the Wind Harvest team?
Well, first I should probably introduce myself a little bit more. It's, because I'm definitely the lead reason why the company exists today, because I've been working on it for a long time. There was an original company way back in 1976. I became an investor in that company in 1990. I followed it, and in 2000, I started trading my company's time for shares in that company. And we and all of us shareholders in 2006 sold that company to Wind Harvest International, and I became a founder of Wind Harvest International. So that's 2006 is when that company came about. I was the CEO for a couple of years. I brought in a big major investment, but my co-founders with me said they did not like the person and they removed me from the CEO. But I stayed on because I really wanted to make this thing happen. So I became part of every part of the company, from writing the grants for the California Energy Commission to helping with the manufacturing, overseeing the engineers, supervising, sales, every part of the company. And I did that for the next until 2019. And then we realized we needed the capital to get us through technology readiness level 7, which is a full-scale prototype operating in turbulent conditions. And the board put me back as CEO, and we raised money from crowdfunding enough to get us through technology readiness level 7. And that turbine is down in Texas, and I can show it to you later if people would like to see it. I can show it spinning. And that is the journey of me. I am determined to get this thing fully available for the world, because it's the biggest thing I can do in my lifetime is to open up turbulent wind for the first time ever for harvesting and use all over the world. There is these phenomenally windy resources, but there's nothing that can make use of it. And the world needs this level of development of renewable energy, and it needs it quickly. And these existing wind farms are the easiest places to build out. They're already zoned, they got the roads in place, all of that stuff. So my passion, my lifelong passion has always been doing something for the next generation, for the environment. And I chose over the last 15, 20 years that this is it. This is the biggest thing I can do of all the different things I do in different organizations I'm involved in. Making this product, bringing this to the world is by far the most important thing I can do because it's huge.
It's a massive problem, and it looks like you're working on a very big solution as well. Let's talk about a couple of the other players on the team
Sure.
here. I know you have Christine and Cornelius. We can start there and
They're the
continue
two
into
board
some of the
members.
rest.
They've been investors for as long, not Christine has even longer than I have. And Khan was one of the original people coming on in 2012 with the Series A round. That was that financed the completion of technology readiness levels 5 and 6. And Khan and Christine are both great board members. Khan is with Clean Energy Holdings. It's developing green hydrogen gas projects. They want to use our turbines in those green hydrogen gas projects. And Christine has started a couple different companies. And so those are my board members. Then we have Dr. Ala Ajala. She is the principal engineer. She lives in the Bay Area. She has been with the company for going on, this is her getting to her third year. And she got a PhD in structural engineering out of Scotland. And she has been running the company's engineering team now for about a year and a half. And she is the expert. She's been mentored by the senior engineer, Dr. David Malcolm, on all aspects of the computer modeling. So she's a young woman who is just great to have this guy who's been in the industry for as long as Dr. Malcolm has been mentoring Ala to take over from him on all aspects of that. Critically important. We're the only ones who really have an aeroelastic model for vertical axis wind turbines that have been validated as accurately as that. And Dr. Malcolm's paper has been accepted, and they're going to Europe to present it on how accurate the modeling is. So those are the two key engineers. Above that, we have, some great advisors. We have, Omar Garcia is down in Texas. He's our mechanical engineer on site, and right there with the Model 3.1. We don't have a very big team in terms of other folks because we're going to be hiring a CFO and hiring a general manager as soon as we get through this certification program. But we have the team for the certification program. That's solid. And the rest of the team we're going to build out with more money. Right now, we're a pretty lean machine.
Absolutely. But the core team you put together already, though, very, very strong, and a lot of folks with their expertise are going to lend itself well to wind harvest. Um, for those who are unfamiliar with the space, can you talk about how big the problem is that wind harvest is solving? And if you want to tie in your solution to it, that could work as well, or we could come to the solution as a separate conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about the wasted space. It's just a wasted resource, right? Here is this wind. It bounces along the ground. It hit objects. It spins in different ways, like little vortices, like tornadoes. It moves around up and down. And this type of wind can't be used by a traditional turbine, the one that looks like a propeller, the tall ones that are in the picture behind me. Because you can see it comes up over these ridge lines. It just is a messy wind. Um, and people have never been able to figure out how to make a product that will work in those conditions. And that is what we've done. So here are these, we did an analysis of the 10,000 wind farms out of the 33,000 in the world. We found their wind farm. We looked up the wind speed using UL's Wind Navigator, and we figured out that about 18% of the world's wind farms have just excellent wind resources near the ground, better than most places you can get in California right now. And that those resources will be profitable, or should be profitable to people in those areas who build out those resources. And so the market is somewhere, total market over the next 20 years is about $1 trillion market. It is so enormous, it's hard to even think about. because it grows. Every 18% of all wind farms onshore are likely to have the same excellent conditions. And the market for wind is just growing. It's going to grow phenomenally to try to meet this net of zero emissions goal. And so now they'll have a new product that can actually utilize this turbulent wind that so far no one else has been able to make use of.
Yeah. And I know you have your presentation with you on the backside here, so maybe this is a chance to start to present it. But can you show folks, kind of the significance of that turbulent wind and what wind harvest can do to capture it?
Okay, so yeah, let me share my screen. And I'm going to go to the um, deck over here. Um, and so here it is. So this is the tall turbines on our ridgeline. This little one here, right here, is one of our turbines. They can be placed on these ridge lines, and the wind is very turbulent near the ground. But up here, where their blades are, it's not turbulent. It's nice and smooth. So that's the core of what turbulent wind is and why a turbine underneath the tall turbine. Now, it can't be tall enough to get in the way of the tall turbine because then it'll cause turbulence. So it has to remain short. And the other key part of these things is our turbines are about 3 feet apart from each other. So they're very dense. They create a row like a windrow along a farm field. But instead of a windrow, there are a row of these turbines doing the same thing, collecting the wind. And instead of windrow slowing it down, this turns that wind into electricity. So, let me just show one more thing here. Yes, so here we go. As long as I'm on this. So the turbine goes through steps in its prototype development. And each of these steps is enormously costly to actually develop and build the turbine, put it out there in oftentimes a remote area or distance, and then go through the whole certification validation process, and then redo it, build another version of the prototype, and each step is a new prototype. And so now we're here at this end product, and we are ready for the installation of it in Texas, right next to our Model 3.1. And this is the kind of a picture of how tall it is, what it really will look like. And maybe I'll stop there and let people ask me another question.
That was fantastic. No, thanks so much for showing that with I think that really kind of brings home the problem solution there. Somebody says, congratulations on your recently awarded patent. How many patents awarded or pending does the company have? So let's talk a little bit about your IP strategy and how it all fits together.
Okay, so I'm going to share my lovely screen again, and I am going to show you a very interesting, this is what a show we did for the Northern California um, engineers. And I'm just going to show you, this is turbulence in the tall turbines, there's our turbines, and this is the patent. Ta-da! This hinge that connects the arm to the blade. This turbine is going to operate something like 15 million revolutions a year. Right, 15 million revolutions. And each revolution, there's a push and a pull. And that blade, like any kind of you take a paper clip and you move it often enough and it breaks. And so this is the most difficult part of having a turbine operate in turbulent wind. And the solution is a hinge. And that pin there between the two parts of the hinge is amazingly strong. It takes the forces and it takes the minor movements and it moves it right into a pin and not into welded or bolted together pieces. And we got that patent. That's a phenomenal patent. It's going to be very difficult for somebody to make a turbine for turbulence and not use a hinge on that connection. And we have the patent for that. And the other parts of the patents are things like the hinge connection to the arm, to the mast, and how the mast connects together. And we have things that inside of the blades are patented. We have this hex mast, how it connects together and is bolted on a 6-sided mast. We actually have a patent for that. Flat sides are super wonderful to work with versus round tubes. So round two, for example, this patent over here on the old way we did it was $24,000. The new way is $6,000. It's enormously cost effective, and it's going to be difficult for people to be able to make these kinds of turbines without utilizing our patents. At least we think it's going to be very costly if you try to build a turbine without using our patents. And so we think we're going to have the biggest source of income in the future is going to be the the income from licensing patents to the biggest wind turbine makers in the world. Because the market is so huge, $1 trillion market, there's no way any one company can supply the demand. So Mitsubishi, the Siemens, GE, Vestas, they're going to want our patents so they can jump into the market and start making turbines and supplying the demand. And we're all for that, right? We can make a smaller amount per turbine, but the cost in a licensing income is very low. You don't have to have any overhead for licensing income from patent licensing. So we think that is going to be our largest source of net income in the future is our patents. So we're very happy to have got one granted. We have 6 more on the way. We have 4 more that we're going to, we have 2 more that are preparing and 2 more that are ready to go as well. So we'll be adding 4 more patents here in the next 3 to 4 months. So we'll have an 11 patent portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for digging into the IP strategy there. You talked about the licensing play as part of the revenue model. Can you dig deeper into some of the other pieces of the revenue model or how you plan to generate revenue here with Wind Harvest?
Yes. So it's a sales. We sell turbines. And we make money on the sale of the turbine. We mark it up and we make the margin on the sale. It's a little more complicated because very big projects, when you're, buying 1,000 turbines, the company that's going to do that, the engineering, procurement, construction management company on those big projects, they want the right to procure the tower themselves. And they want to do other kinds of things, and they'll probably do the assembly themselves. So we don't have a markup on the assembly and we don't have a markup on the installation. We have a markup on all the components that come from all the vendors because we buy all of our components from vendors, specially ordered that you're making this component, it looks like this, and then they get shipped to an assembly facility, either our assembly facilities or the EPCM's assembly facility. And the sale occurs when all those components get there, and we get a markup on all those supplied components, the power converter, the generator, the blades, the rotor, the mast, the tower, all that stuff. So that's how we make money. Our biggest source of money besides licensing is
Yeah, and then like
on the sale.
absolutely, absolutely. And that ties well into some of the questions coming in here. Well, actually, first comment, I was just in Abilene, Texas area where they have a lot of the big wind turbines like you have in your background picture. It looked like it could be a perfect spot for Wind Harvest for the smaller turbines as well. So
I'll go be straight up on it. Flat land is not usually very good in most of the Great Plains for our turbines compared to the tall turbines, because the tall turbines, there's a wind shear in Texas. And on the flats, that wind shear means that, gosh, it's so much windier up above that why would you put in our turbines when it's almost endless windy land and you just add another wind farm someplace else where you get so much wind up above? Where we work in Texas is in the mesas. When the wind hits the side of the mesa and goes up over the top, it speeds up. When it goes over a ridgeline, it speeds up. When it goes in between a mountain valley, it speeds up. And this speed up effect near the ground, that's where we put our turbines. So most of Texas is not got competitively windy enough for us to go into that market.
yeah, no, thanks for that question and that feedback there on the Q&A there in the chat section. People also curious, what is the cost of building a new turbine? You can just kind of ballpark that.
Sure, sure. So the way people measure costs, and people who have solar panels on their roof will be able to say, oh, I know, I put up 5 kilowatts on my roof and it cost me $25,000 all in. So my solar cost me $5,000 a kilowatt. So that's probably pretty much close to what it costs to put solar on a home. So in any construction, well, what's the cost of the product and what's the cost of the installation? And so those are broken apart. We like to put it all together because our installation costs are very low, our delivery transportation costs are very low, our assembly costs are very low. So we think our product cost will be about, installed cost will be about $5,000 a kilowatt when we first make sales in 2025 and 2026. But then it'll rapidly drop down to, we believe the installed cost will be closer to $3,000 a kilowatt, and down to even lower in larger projects. So this is competitive with the tall turbines, but not everywhere. It's competitive in places like California, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, most of the Caribbean places, but it's not as competitive in places like Texas. But the market in California is huge. The last wind farm, 100 megawatt wind farm, took 21 years to make. The cost per kilowatt, they won't tell us what the cost per kilowatt is, but my guess is it was closer to $5,000 to $6,000 a kilowatt to take all the time value of that money and really say, what did this really cost them? And that's what the competition is. So we can come in at $3,000 a kilowatt because we can get the dang thing installed in months. And everything's just ready to go with roads and installation and transmission lines on what we call capacity factor enhancement projects. Not full build outs, you'll need a new transmission line. But for smaller percentage projects on a wind farm, you don't need a transmission line. And that's huge not to need a transmission line.
No, that is a big swing for sure, and we can dig deeper into what that means practically. But we got so many great questions coming in. I want to make sure we get to as many of them as possible. So, and then generally, do you handle the components, or do they kind of ship directly to a central assembly point?
Oh, that's such a good question. Man, the discussion, and we have a great expert, a guy named Tom Williams on board. He has 20 years experience with Ventura Wind in every aspect of the company. And so we've been working through on a new financial modeling of how do you really account for all this stuff. And it's a complex little world. So in Barbados, which is one of our biggest markets, I'll give you this as an example. There is a company there called Williams Industry. It's one of the largest companies on the island, and it has Williams Renewables, and it also has a company called Steel and Structural Limited. And we visited Steel and Structural, and they can make much of our turbine right there. They have the ability to take the steel tube for the arms and cut them and drill the holes in the right places. They have the ability to cut the holes in the blades. They have the ability to cut the holes in the tower components. They have the ability to put all that together and then assemble it right there. So 50% of the labor of the turbine can be done in Barbados, which is just a huge plus to the island's economy and why the government's interested in a product that they can import and use so much of their own labor on. So in that case, they're doing the assembly there, but the components are coming from the United States are going to make some of these components. Some of these components are going to be made in Europe. And in the future years, who knows, maybe some of the generators, the gearboxes, not the gearboxes, we don't make gearboxes, but the drive shafts, for example. I use this example. India, for example, has an enormously competitive, high quality ability to make steel components. They can make the drive shaft there, put on the rings, and ship them anywhere in the world. Now you're ordering thousands of drive shafts from a single supplier. You can go to other suppliers, but now your price can significantly drop. You still have to bring the drive shaft from someplace in the world to the assembly facility because most places do not make drive shafts. They do not handle a 3,000 pound piece of metal, forge it, and then machine it to the exactness that we need. So it's a very interesting process. It's going to allow us to compete all over the world for the component suppliers. And a lot of it allows for the local component suppliers in local countries to supply. And therefore you meet local content requirements much, much easier because all these countries around the world have local content requirements. And our turbine is so simple to make and build for most of the components that it can be made locally and will be.
That's fantastic, Kevin. Thanks for that debrief there. And folks are transitioning over to a question about the environmental impact. And obviously, there's a big environmental question here. And there are a couple elements to it, but we'll start with this one. What is the effect of the turbines on birds? And are there any design features that minimize harm to wildlife? That's an interesting question.
So the good news is that vertical axis wind turbines are, I don't know, are known to just be less impactful. The only installation where there was vertical axis turbines in large numbers was in the Altamont Hills near San Jose, California. And that is known that those turbines over there between the horizontals and the verticals killed a lot of birds, raptors especially. So they did extensive studies on these things, and they had bird people out there evaluating, and basically the verticals killed about half the number of birds that the horizontals did. And these were two-bladed vertical turbines. So they had just two blades. Ours is a three-bladed turbine. And the key difference is the dimensionality. The traditional propeller type turbine is two-dimensional to the bird. And a vertical axis turbine is three-dimensional. And a three-bladed turbine like ours is even more three-dimensional. And birds evolved to see and avoid three-dimensional objects. They would just, and so if you can actually see birds, cars are coming down and wow, that bird missed me. And, I don't hit very many birds. They sometimes fly close because they can judge the speed of a three-dimensional object and avoid it. And they can see it coming at them. It's not coming down at them from above like a horizontal or up from the bottom like a horizontal. It's coming side to side, and they can see and avoid that. So the expectation is they will be significantly less impacted by verticals than horizontals. But we are going to add what's called motion detection technology. There's two kinds. There's camera, and there is thermal, and there is another one that just takes pictures and identifies it by the species from these amazing cameras that are coming out these days. And you can see these birds hundreds of yards away. And the detection can say, okay, a flock of birds are coming in, and they're coming in at this direction. And if the camera is set so that, these birds are known to not see and avoid the turbines. The detection technology says, those birds are coming. Slow the turbines down or even stop them. And they can be seen so far away, and the stopping time is such that the turbines can be stopped before the birds get there. So where there are bird, and pretty much every turbine project we have initially is going to have this detection technology because it's the fastest way to figure out are birds being harmed, because you have it 24/7 and you've got a third-party entity that's evaluating the data, and you've got experts coming to the field to see if you actually did kill any birds. And then you're figuring this back in and say, well, those birds are no problem. They never hit our turbines. Program it so when those birds are around, let it go. They will never hit it. Other ones are more sensitive. So this is the plan on how we will not harm wildlife as best as we can.
Yeah, I imagine those sensors will help protect the turbines as well, but that's so great that
Oh,
you're
yes,
already building in
very
there.
good. That is a secondary benefit. You get to have see who's visiting your site.
Exactly. Not that there would be any bad actors out there, but a little
Oh,
recruiting
no,
may go a
no,
long way.
it is a service. So we make money off of services as well. And so one of the services is 24/7 flight fault protection, and another was is surveillance and bird detection. So we make smaller income streams off of that, but for as long as they have those products up. So that's a secondary revenue for us.
Perfect. And some recurring revenue there. This gives us a perfect chance to transition to some more of the other great questions you guys have here. Please do keep it coming. Love the questions that are coming. But we're about halfway through our programming, so let's go ahead and get the shameless plug out of the way. We're on the line with co-founder and CEO Kevin Wolf of Wind Harvest. They're actively raising capital on the Netcapital platform. I'm adding a link to that back into the chat. Or you can go to netcapital.com and search Wind Harvest, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/wind harvest. So go ahead and check that out. You can review the offering page if you're so inclined. you too can invest. So got to make sure that folks are that are aware about the opportunity there. Continuing along, and we're gonna have to go through a power half hour here probably to get through as many of these as possible. So Kevin, in the context of a general kind of a 5-year strategy, what are you looking forward to over the next 5 years? And again, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a big caveat. The future is inherently speculative and uncertain. We don't know. But what are some of your goals to accomplish over the next 5 years here?
So the turbine components are being ordered now. The net capital raise is going so well. It's gone over $400,000 this morning that we are now able to order the longest lead time components. So we just ordered the two generators from Soga in Italy, and they're on their way to being here probably at the end of summer, early fall. And then we ordered the die for the extrusion of blades from Step G in Germany. So that is processing. So we are on track for getting this turbine installed this fall and fully certified this next winter, less than a year from now. So that's huge. Now at the
That's so
same time,
huge.
based on how much money comes in over this next summer of capital raise, we'll have the ability to put more money into projects in Barbados, in the United States, and other places so that they get further along so that in 2025, we can order 50 turbines. Maybe it's only 20 turbines, depending on where the projects are. And we'll do another capital raise to provide the capital for that, because new products like ours have to get through the very last step of the technology readiness level process, which is technology readiness level 9. Your customers want to buy $10 million in turbines from you. They want to borrow that money. And the bank says, I want the turbines to be collateral for the loan. And the loan is a 10-year note. And you need to know that those turbines are going to operate for 10 years so that you can make the energy produced to pay off that note. And what will banks require of a new product on a $10 million note? Well, it depends on the bank, right? Some banks will take, you're going to have to show me 100 turbines operating for 3 years before I'll lend you any money. Others say, well, 6 turbines, 1 year, and an insurance wrap. And you'll have to ensure that if something happens to those turbines, the insurance covers it and I don't lose my money on my note, my loan. So so our plan is, after we get these 2 turbines certified, and we have to raise another round of capital, and we think it's going to be, in the could be millions of dollars, and every company money that comes in develops another project and does another order and puts more turbines in the ground. And then finally, probably out in 2006, the banks will be happy with us, and customers can buy the product knowing that they'll be financed. So then the sky's the limit. Now you have banks financing your products. You've got, you've proven, the thing we're also doing in 2004 and 5 is LiDAR, so that we can confirm for the wind farm owners, how does our wake, the turbulence that comes off our turbines, will it affect their turbines? And all the modeling says, nope, it won't affect them at all. It'll only help them. Well, they want proof of that before they'll let us into wind farms. So we are going to invest in that as well. But all this leads to about 2026, 2027 pilot projects in wind farms. Once we have pilot projects in wind farms, then that whole $1 trillion wind farm market opens up. And then we think the Vestas and the GEs and others are going to say, okay, we'll take your patents and we'll use them and we'll enter the market, because now you've proven you've got a certified turbine. The banks will actually finance your products, and you've got a wind farm pilot projects in the ground. And now the whole huge market opens up. And so somewhere around 2027, 2028, we expect to be making money then from licensing our patents. And the other big part of it is that we are going to be investing in the trade wind turbine and the Ridgeline turbine. Since we're first to market and we got the biggest turbines available, and we've got this great engineering team with a lot of experience, we're going to be the lead and get new patents and develop new types of turbines for these specialized markets. And we'll continue to be the leader in vertical axis wind turbine technology and have more patents to license. And I think that the rest of the players are going to say, oh, just let Wind Harvest do the engineering. We'll just make sure that we make our cut on bringing these turbines to the world because we'll be the best engineering firm for verticals.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you for giving us the kind of the trajectory there. And again, these are all kind of expectations, working towards those goals. But that sounds like the pretty solid track to get there. Couple quick comments, then we'll keep going on questions here. Some folks are saying that I have to think that bird issue can be partially solved with ways to encourage birds to fly elsewhere through like kind of sounds and
Oh,
things
that's
like
a
that.
great one. That is so good because first, wind turbines are not usually put in bird areas. It's windy. Birds don't like a lot of wind. It's not a great place to be flying around in when it's super windy. So that's an advantage. The first thing you do is try to put your turbines in places where there's not a lot of birds, like the San Gorgonio Pass in Southern California. It's desert. There are very few birds there. So yes, that's a very good idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about the competitive landscape in the vertical axis wind turbine space? Other players and your differentiator. I'm not sure if you have a slide you want to share about it.
Um, yeah, I do have a slide, but no, I'll just tell it because there's not really a lot to see. They're turbines that all look like ours. They're H-type turbines. They have straight blades and a center piece and different angles to a center mast. So there is a company called Fairwind out of Europe that has made a 50 kilowatt version of the turbine, and we haven't really heard much about them in the last 2 years. There's a company called XFlow. It comes out of Dr. DeBerry's lab out of Caltech. Ian Browning is also the CEO of that company, and they are building a 25 kilowatt vertical axis turbine. But I'm not sure if they are going after the turbulent wind. All the pictures I've seen of them show them up high on tall towers, and that is what you do to escape turbulence. It takes a special machine to handle the near ground turbulence. Then the two other vertical axis turbine companies we know of are both making giant vertical turbines for floating in the offshore market in the deep shore ocean. And that's Sea Twirl and Worldwide Wind. So we are really the only ones we know of who is going after the turbulent wind market.
And that's a perfect segue into this question here, which is, taking a step back for a moment, how did the idea come to you about the kind of the sort of turbine and in this space? How did this whole thing get started? I love that question.
Okay, so it started with somebody's dream. The founder of the company, one of the founders of the company, a guy named Bob Thomas, was an aerodynamic expert. And he was also a follower of Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, psychologist, great person who had followers, and they had Jungian retreats that he went to. And if you're into Carl Jung, you know that if you have a reoccurring dream, you're supposed to tell about it in the retreat. So Bob has this reoccurring dream where he's climbing a cliff, and at the top of the cliff, on the edge of falling, is a series of stars carved into the side of the cliff. And only when he reaches for the star and grabs the star is he miraculously brought up to the top of the cliff and saved. So he tells the story, the dream story, and three of the people at the end of the retreat came to him and said, "We want you to quit your job and figure out what the dream means. We think it's a very powerful dream." And he said, "Well, I think the dream involves wind turbines because I've been thinking a lot about wind turbines, and you can do a vertical axis turbine. And if you put kind of pillars or stators on the corner of a five-pointed star, you'll get more wind in the middle." They said, "That's a great idea. We want here, we'll put up money." And one of the people was a guy named Sam Francis, who was the world's most high-paid artist in the world. He had the most stuff in museums. He was just a very wealthy guy. And he ends up putting almost $6 million in today's money into that company to move it forward. So it all started off this guy's dream. And he knew wind, and he knew that near the ground was this turbulent wind resource that needed a turbine like a vertical axis turbine. He then became the manager of the California Wind Energy Program in the early 1980s, and he's known in a number of books as the godfather of American wind in the United States, because without him, there probably would not have been a wind industry. So Bob Thomas is a core part of this company, is our origin story.
Yeah, that's a heck of an origin story. Thanks for the question and thanks for the answer there. Um, and earlier you were talking about some of the initial projects. Can you do a quick recap on where the first project is or where any of these are deployed at this point?
So the first project is down in Texas. And because we have a power purchase agreement for the energy that's being sold, and we have a lease, that project meets the IRS requirements to pick up a 30% tax credit. So we are setting up a limited liability company that is going to have a tax harvesting investor who wants those tax credits and wants the accelerated depreciation to own that company and then buy our fully installed 2 turbines that we're installing now, plus the Model 3.1 that's there, and be able to get a 30% tax credit. So that is about a $1.2 million sale. And the way this works is that that company owns the turbines for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, all the federal taxes are being used. And then we take over because we lent them the rest of the money to buy our turbines. And we don't make a whole lot of money on that lease. We make the money on the margin on the sale, and they make the money on the tax credits. So that'll be our first sale. And that's the model for the sales all over the United States. So we're developing, we have projects that we've got, just initially in the pipeline in Anza Hills in Southern California, in Solano County, up in South Dakota. There's a project in an Air Force base that we've been advancing. So those are the United States projects, and they'll make use of these tax credits. Then other projects, like we've invested many years in Barbados with Dr. Ariana Marshall as our lead down there. And she's done a great job of setting it up so that as soon as we have money, they'll be able to move forward on some projects there with on government land. They have this land they took over from the from the Queen of England, and they have crown land that's very windy. And they don't have the ability to put tall turbines, and they don't want to put much solar because it's so land consumptive. But they can have our turbines line their rugby and soccer fields, and they can, finance their sports through the energy sold from those turbines. So that's one of the big things she was able to advance for Barbados.
That's an incredible project. I love that. And you got people's gears turning talking about the tax credits. So we got a couple questions coming in about that. Let's allocate a couple moments here. So do you believe that the upfront direct payment of the tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act, I think that's what they're going with, the IRA there. Yeah, probably the Inflation Reduction Act. Do you think it will help your US projects significantly? And
Oh,
how does
yeah.
the Infrastructure
Oh,
Act and manufacturing in America impact you? Any other special tax credits? So let's bundle those together.
wow. That's a great question. So besides the 30% tax credit, and once we are able to get to a supply that we make the steel tubes in the United States, right now it's European stock steel because it has a very narrow profile. It's just fantastic. And the US steel is a higher profile and has a lot more drag. So we are using the European. But once we get to the point where we can have that manufactured here in the United States, we get a 40% tax credit. So at a 40% tax credit, now that's on the entire project. And then in addition to that, you make the towers in the United States, you make the generator in the United States, the power converter in the United States. All of those get manufacturing credits and subsidies. So then we are able to get a lower price from our vendors when they're made in the United States. Then the Inflation Reduction Act provides grants of up to $1 million for projects in rural areas. All of our projects are in rural areas. So they would all qualify for another $1 million grant. So there's just a stream of excellent ways in which money can flow into our turbines. And why this is so important, and why I think this is the reason why this Inflation Reduction Act is so important to renewables, is that an early company like ours, it costs a lot more to build 20 turbines, 50 turbines, 100 turbines than 5,000 turbines, 10,000 turbines a year. So how do you get from a beginning company to the 10,000 turbines a year? Well, it's really helpful to have some tax credits to the customer because then we get to charge what it costs us, a higher amount, and we get to put on a good margin. And so our margins are going to probably be twice the margins of the very competitive horizontal axis turbines behind us. We're looking at 25 to 30% margins. They're in 10 to 15% margin territory. And then we are able to, it costs because we are short turbines and we're just more costly. Our turbines are going to be about twice the cost of the tall turbines. So we're going to make about 4 times the margin per sale than the horizontal axis turbine. So it's a very good system. And then the tax credits is on top of whatever you sold the turbine for. So it doesn't care what you sold the turbine for. It cares at what the total project cost is. So we will do very well in this United States tax system.
That is great. Great questions and great answer there, Kevin. Um, Folks are interested. Do you have a simulation that kind of tested the operating life of the vertical axis wind turbines? And
Yeah, so
and we can
the
tie into that with the kind of aeroelastic modeling. I think you have a white paper on that. We can share that with the
yes,
folks.
very good. So this modeling came out of Sandia National Labs, and it was done on the vertical axis turbines done in the late 1970s. And our senior engineer, um, David Malcolm, got involved with helping figure out how to fix those flow wind turbines I was telling you about that were killing half the birds in the Altamont Pass, the two-bladed ones. And they were made of aluminum just like ours. And there was a break where that arm was connecting to the blade was breaking and fracturing. And David was brought in to help figure it out. And so he used Sandia's National Labs model and figured out, okay, there's a fatigue life model that they have. And once you run the numbers through the fatigue life model, it says, oh, this is going to break in about 5 years. And that's when they started to break. So that model David brought to us when he retired in 2015. And he had been working on it on other projects. And then he got the data from our turbines, and that model became our model. And we were able to validate his model with 2 more data sets. The turbines in Denmark, model 3.0, and the turbine in Texas, model 3.1. And all that validation says it's a very accurate model as models go. And the fatigue life analysis says the weakest part, the part that will wear out the fastest in our turbine, it's not the tower, it's not the foundation, it's not that center mast, hexagonal mast. It's not the arms that are coming off that are kind of hinged on it and all those hinges. You replace the hinges every 20 years. You rewind the generator every 20 years. You replace the power performer every 20 years. But the rest of the darn stuff will last for 70 plus years. The weakest link is the blades, and they have a 74-year life, fatigue life. 74 years. That allows for somebody who owns our turbine to see dramatic price cost lowering in the future because steel prices and aluminum prices are going to go up, but they already got that. It's in the ground. It's not going up. It's just producing energy. And so places like Barbados, if these are owned by the government, they become huge assets for future generations of the country because they own the means of production and it's going to last for 70 plus years.
No, that is incredible. The build quality and the ability for it to be able to sustain like that, super, super impressive. Folks have been asking, and I'm going to kind of go ahead and jump out there. This is actively being recorded. We will go ahead and upload that to the Netcapital YouTube account shortly after this. I can go ahead and add a link to that into the chat feature here, but you could always just go to YouTube and search Netcapital as well. But we can go ahead and add this into the chat for those of you who missed some of the earlier part of the presentation, or for those of you who are interested in sharing with folks who have not been able to attend. So definitely do review that and share it broadly. I'll add another link to that at the end of the program here. So great questions, great answers about that operating life. So glad you're able to do that. So this is actually a really interesting one. You were talking about the ability to scale over time and how the production costs, diminish pretty quickly. With scale, could you ever get the price down to 1,000 per kilowatt, or where do you think is like the lowest?
So that is
Yeah.
I love this question because it's not So the price per kilowatt drops with size. And you can see the taller, bigger and bigger turbines that they're making out there. They were once 75 kilowatts, then they became 150, then 500 kilowatts. Wow, they're making a 500 kilowatt. Oh, they made 1,000 kilowatt turbine. Now, oh, 2,002 megawatt turbine. Now they're doing what, 10 megawatt turbines? And they're trying for a 20 megawatt turbine. Well, now you've got a price reduction. Now they're hitting a limit and they're not seeing it, but there's the savings in the installation. You're only installing one turbine instead of five when it's 10 megawatts versus two. And so there's savings there, which also benefits the size. But for us, we have to keep them short because if we make them tall, voila, behind me, you'll interfere with the tall turbines around you. So you wouldn't be able, you have to keep them short. Well, if you keep them short, you can't, there's a size limit. And that size limit means it's highly unlikely we're going to get our cost of goods less than, say, $1,500. And their cost of goods are $700 or so. So that's just the nature of this size limited turbine. And then it's steel and aluminum. And that is, you're going to have a difficult time surviving in the mid-level wind without a aluminum and steel structure because it's so dang turbulent down there. So anyways, it is, we're not going to be directly competitive, but we win in the installation costs, the transportation costs, the land use costs, the connection to the grid costs, the fact that you can't put tall turbines in properties like on a warehouse site because they have setback easements. And these things behind me are 100 meters tall, 3 to 400 feet tall. And that means they have to be placed far apart from anybody's neighboring property or roads or transmission lines. So there are places where they can't go because the roads are too tight. But short turbines will always be competitive in different markets, but they'll never make the price of the tall turbines. But the market will still be huge.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks for that. The use case is more kind of varying. Um, so somebody mentioned they think Barbados will greatly benefit here to the extent that they can add wind. A lot of the primary use of the fuel and oil and diesel are currently to generate electricity. So this could improve their local air quality, really impact the community. So thanks for that feedback. I think that sounds right. And someone asked, can the components be recycled at the end of that 73-year lifespan, or is there a repurpose or a reuse from there of these of the wind harvest turbine?
Well, a good question. So it's a aluminum, 100% aluminum blades. It can be recycled. And recycling is way lower cost than smelting of bauxite, mining the bauxite, smelting it, all that kind of stuff. You just save an enormous amount of energy when you recycle. And this is the highest quality aluminum available. So it has a significant value. One of the weird things to think about is what's the price of aluminum going to be in the future? And you've got this aluminum blade that's been on 75 years and now you have to recycle it. My God, I bet you your recycling cost is higher than your original purchase cost. Your money you're going to make from recycling it. Anyway, so yeah, it's steel and aluminum. It's all recyclable. There's a tiny little fiberglass in the transition fairings between the arm and the blade that cover that hinge that's aerodynamically shaped. And that's made out of a 3D printer, and it involves plastic. But that's it. So it's like a 1.1% of the total weight, if even that, is plastic, and the rest is steel and aluminum.
That's fantastic. Yep. So generally recyclable, super cool there. I'm going to try to get to these last couple of questions, and pretty shortly I'm going to ask you that outside of the cash question, how can folks get involved? So
Sure.
it's a good the audience start thinking about how you can support wind harvest outside of the cash contribution. But back to the capital investment, again, I'm going to give you a big asterisk here that, the future is generally uncertain and there's no guarantees of an exit or anything like that. But what do you view as the exit strategy in terms of return on investment for folks that are considering investing in
Oh my
wind
gosh.
harvest here?
At the bottom of the Netcapital page, you'll see that at a share price of 6 cents, it's about $15 million. At a share price of 7 cents, it's about $17 million. Those are outstanding shares, not fully diluted shares. Um, our, our last preferred share price was 9 cents. Now, the difference between preferred shares, they have a higher value because they get first access to dividends. But we think our exit strategy is going to be through an IPO or a sales. One of the big companies told us that their CTO said, "Oh, we really like your technology, but we're not going to be able to get into verticals, but we'd like to buy your turbine when you finally get it certified. We'd like to buy your company." So that's not my preference. My preference is to take it right through technology readiness level 9. We've got that's not that difficult to do. And then, because now we've got these great other team people and who really know how to do this stuff and build a huge company. Now, I don't know how to do that, but people do know how to do it and they can be hired to do that. Then we bring it into an IPO. And in that IPO, everybody's shares are now sellable and they got them for 6 cents. And what the share price would be in 2026 after we've accomplished all those things, I'm not allowed to say, but I think you're talking a big multiple over what they are now.
That's fantastic. All right, let me slide in this last question before we get to the outside of the cash question. So you were talking about the origin story and the Dream Network. How did you get involved? What was your connection to the ecosystem here, and how did you join the Wind Harvest team? Good question.
I met the guy who was at that Dream, guy named George Wagner, who is the founder of the California League of Conservation Voters. He was a leading environmental attorney in the state of California, and he became one of the co-founders with Sam Francis and Bob Thomas. And I met him on a river trip because I was volunteering at Friends of the River, and I would take VIPs down this river that was being destroyed by the New Melones Dam. And at that dinner that night, we're sitting around the campfire and we're talking about 3 Mile Island, the nuclear disaster in 1979, the year before. And we talked about the um, the OPEC oil crisis of 79, and that someday we're going to probably be at war in the Middle East because of oil. And then we talked about Jimmy Carter's Global 2000 report that said the greatest threat to human survival was not nuclear war, but global warming, and that coal was a problem. So a lot of people are saying the only solution to this problem was to build renewable energy, and the only way we had was hydro. So we needed to dam every remaining river in the country. And I'm a river guide. I love rivers. That's a terrible idea. And George says, "No, wait, there's wind." What? What? He says, "Yeah, windmills, they grind grain, they pump water in Holland. Well, they can also produce electricity. And I'm involved in a company that's doing this." And I just love that idea. I followed up with them. I saw their 3 turbines in 1984 in Concord, California that they had in their prototypes. I met Bob Thomas and his son, Dean Thomas, and I thought, this is it. We have a way out of having to dam our rivers or burn coal or go to the Middle East for oil. We should use wind. And so that's what got me involved in the company.
That's awesome. I'm glad somebody did the follow-up question. Someone says the Stanislaus River. Somebody's giving you the exclamation mark. Someone's pumped. Um,
Yes.
Last little bit here. I love that. I love asking this question. I think it's a creative one, so I'd love to hear your answer here. Outside of cash, and again, the link to the offering page is added to the chat feature. Anybody can go learn more about Wind Harvest, and if you're so inclined, you can invest. But outside of the investment capital, how can folks on the line here today support your vision and support your mission at Wind Harvest?
Well, we have the ability to evaluate any property in the world for its wind speed of at 50, 80 feet above the ground. And so if you think you know of a windy property, your aunt owns a ranch somewhere, or you think you live in a windy area, well, then you're visiting on vacation and you go, wow, it's super windy here. Send us the address, send us a lot long, and we'll tell you what the wind speed is. And it's the wind speed because the energy in the wind is the cube of the wind speed. So, gosh, even a slightly higher wind speed at a cube law means that you're going to get a lot more energy produced. And you take that times, well, what's the cost for energy in that area? Oh, it's Barbados. It's 30 cents, 40 cents a kilowatt hour at home. And, well, then you don't need a very big wind speed to make money on it. So that we'll do that evaluation, and we're always looking for leads. And really, the lead is to the property owner because the next step is it's windy. Will that property owner put up our turbines? Would they consider that? They could lease the land and make money. If they would, then great. Let's move forward on evaluating a project on that site. So anybody can help us with that.
Love that. Love that. So look, keep your eyes open, listen for the wind, find those properties,
Okay.
connect with the landowner.
And then there's one other thing, share the word about us. When you see our social media posts, our YouTube channel, things like that, like and share and comment. That always is helpful. It spreads the word. It's really the only way for most people to hear about us.
Absolutely. So please do share this. Last little question here. Why is now the perfect time to go to netcapital.com and invest in wind harvest?
Oh, because the deal ends on April 29th. And the share price is scheduled to go up after that. And so if you want the best share price we've had in, I don't know, 10 years, that's your option.
Now's the time. Now's the time. So thank you so much for all of the fantastic questions. Thank you for the attendees joining. We had a great crowd today. We got through as many as we could. Sorry for anybody that we didn't get to your questions, but thank you so much for asking them. Thank you so much, Kevin, for hanging out with us, the CEO and co-founder of Wind Harvest here. As I mentioned, they were actively raising capital on Net Capital. I just added a link to that back into the chat. You can select that and go directly to the offering page, or you go to netcapital.com and search Wind Harvest, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/wind harvest, where you can review the offering page and you can invest. And lastly, a quick reminder that this has been recorded. We will upload this to the Net Capital YouTube account. I added a link to that as well into the chat feature, or you can go to youtube.com and search Net Capital, where you'll be able to see these recordings, and this will be uploaded shortly. So please do share this more broadly. And if you missed anything, feel free to go back and catch anything that you might have missed. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us. Kevin, great hanging out with you. Thank you so much today.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And send us email if you have any follow-up questions or you want to find any and meet with me personally. Thank you.
Absolutely. Do definitely reach out. Kevin's been available, so definitely take him up on that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everybody. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye now.
Bye.